Hey, what's up? Welcome back to another edition of the Mandatory Live. We got a full stacked fight preview for you, and that's because, Bryan, we got a crazy Saturday on this Terence Bud Crawford card. There's about 6 fights that are going to be absolutely amazing that I think everyone's looking forward to. But before we get into all of that, make sure to hit that like and subscribe button if you have already subscribed. We do appreciate you. Thank you for rocking with the show. We're also on the audio side, guys. So if you missed this, you can always stream us wherever you get audio. And remember to leave us, a 5-star if you got a couple of minutes, and follow us on our social media channels. We're at the Mandatory TKO. Bryan, like I was saying, there is about like 6 fights on this card. Ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous. How stoked are you for this?
I just hate that SummerSlam is on the same day. But listen, man, Terence Crawford's back. That's reason to celebrate. We know he only fights once a year. So he's fighting at 154 also. We're going to get into that. Like, stepping into a new challenge at this stage of his career is going to be very interesting to see how he handles 154. He's been wanting to do that for a while, per his own admission. We also have Isaac Cruz versus Jose Valenzuela, which is going to be like just two dudes trying to knock each other out very early on in the fight. Unfortunately for Valenzuela, he's had a knockout before, so we'll see what happens there. Andy Ruiz, Jarrell Miller, Jared Anderson has a stiff test. We'll get into that. Andy Cruz and David Morrell, who's sneakily like not even being talked about and fighting for a world title. This card is good. This card is good.
And we know how good David Morrell is. We know how good Andy Cruz is. And I don't even think both of them are being talked about enough for this card. And that's because this card is absolutely stacked. Big Baby Anderson is in here on this card. And we got Andy Ruiz and Miller. Like, this is going to be a crazy card. I'm excited for it. And I wish boxing had more cards like this. And hopefully this is the start of it. I also like that it's in LA because it's been a minute since we've had a fight in LA. And if I was available to it, I would have gone to it. But by the way, we are going to be doing a post-fight show. So after the fights, after SummerSlam, we're going to be rocking with you. Bryan will have you updated on everything SummerSlam as well. And we will be taking your comments. So keep that in mind as well. Keep the comments coming today as well. We will get to them. But Bryan, let's start off with the main event in this one. And the line, I don't actually think it's disrespectful. Terence Bud Crawford is a -700 straight up on the money line, and Madrimov is a +480. Bryan, how are you betting this one, and how do you see this fight going?
Yeah, and we'll talk about the potential ramifications if there were an upset here in a little bit. So we're not going to totally disrespect Madrimov here, but I just Terence Crawford's knocked out 10 or 11 straight guys going back to 2016. So we're talking about basically 8 years of knockouts. And I'm not going to bet that there's not going to be a knockout here. I saw that Ring Magazine, they did their predictions. They had a panel of 21 people, and 2 people picked Madrimov by split decision. A bunch of people picked Crawford by unanimous decision. And I'm just like, listen, I've seen Terence Crawford for damn near his entire career at this point. Like, I remember watching him when he, like, before he cut his hair and then grew it back. Like, we're talking like when he was like 10-0, 15-0 on YouTube on Top Rank. You know what I mean? Like, not even on like HBO. Back when HBO had Top Rank. Rest in peace. Terence Crawford's just the pound for pound best in the world, or number 2 or number 3. But regardless, he's been in that conversation for several years. I just think he's better than Madrimov, who I think is good, but I think he's going to kind of play into Terence Crawford's hands. Like, he's not absurdly fast. He's going to try to pressure him on the inside. Terence Crawford's going to be able to pick him off. He's super comfortable with you trying to pressure him. He'll be able to counter. He can switch stances against him. He has a 6-inch reach advantage against Madrimov. Moving up in weight, still has a 6-inch reach advantage. Like, I just don't see what, unless Madrimov just catches him. But Terence Crawford's been caught before and he's been fine. Like, probably the most underrated thing about him is his chin is absurd. Like, he gets caught and he just fucking laughs at you.
What was the time he got caught? Mean Machine?
Mean Machine.
People were like, oh, he definitely got caught, but he does have a really good chin and he's not afraid to take a punch to throw a punch.
There was a couple times that Errol Spence caught him with like a hard overhand left that, anybody else would have been like stumbling. And Terence Crawford just like, all right, cool. Now here's mine. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, it doesn't matter. So Terence Crawford by knockout, technical knockout, minus 138 at one prominent sports book. It's minus 145 at another, but obviously 138 is better. And we'll see where that lands by opening bell, but that's what I think is going to happen. I think Terence Crawford gets another stoppage here.
You know what? When I saw this fight, it wasn't the fight that I was actually expecting. I would have rather seen him, maybe fight a Jerome Boots Ennis, but we know that this is his first fight at 154. And like Bryan said, his reach is absolutely crazy. Like, I don't think people talk about Terence Bud Crawford's reach and then his size. I go back to that fight with Errol Spence Jr. And honestly, I thought Spence was going to be the bigger man in the ring, but when those two got in the ring, Bud looked huge. Like, he actually looked massive in the ring against Errol Spence. And I thought
Yeah.
it was going to be the other way around. Bud has power. He's extremely skilled. He's good defensively. His footwork is immaculate. And the one thing about Madrimov is he has a low guard, right? So he's always going to get hit by that lead hand. And Bud Crawford has an amazing lead hand. And then even when he uses the high guard, it's a little bit sloppy and he's not quick enough. So he still gets hit by the lead hand. And I think that's going to be one of the things in this fight where we're going to be like, Madrimov is getting bodied by Terence Bud Crawford's lead hand. Defensively, Madrimov can be irresponsible. He does use his angles really well, but I don't think he actually has the best footwork because then he's taking too many steps and then he's going to get hit. I think Bud's going to get to the body as well. I think that in the middle rounds, Bud is going to start to pick him apart. And so I got Bud winning by stoppage or KO as well. However, I actually think it's going to happen between rounds 7 through 12. And that, I believe, I got to look again on what that was, but there was some
I'll
pretty
check.
good value on there. Yeah, I was actually looking this morning. But I like the rounds 7 through 12 for Bud because I think eventually he's going to break down Madrimov. And, no disrespect to him. I think Bud is just better all around. And so it's a plus 145 if you take Terence Bud Crawford to win in round 7 through 12. And I think there's a little bit of value there. So that's how I'm rolling with this fight. Let us know how you're going to be rolling with the main event. But I think Bud gets the stoppage, and I think he does it at 154. And then we're talking about what's next for him.
If you think it's going to be even a little later, plus 270, I think is what I just saw at 9 through 12 for Terence Crawford to get a stoppage late, which he has done before. The only reason I stayed away from group round betting is because I remember the fight against David Avanesian, and I was like, and I had 7 to 12 in that. He knocked him out in round 6, and I was like, you know what? I'm just not going to take my chances because I don't know. Like Terence Crawford, 7 through 12 seems safer. I'd prefer 7 through 12 versus 1 through 6, but we just said why this could actually get ugly pretty quickly once Terence Crawford settles in like round 3. And that's no disrespect, but I mean, Madrimov is from Uzbekistan, who has produced a lot of high level fighters. But Madrimov wasn't even like an amazing amateur fighter. You know what I mean? He's not like he
No,
won
yeah.
like Olympic gold medals or whatever. He won the Asian Games, but he wasn't somebody who had like this highly established.
Decorated amateur
Yeah,
career. Yeah, he
right.
didn't. But he had a lot of amateur fights. Like, you look at his pro record, and you're not seeing that much experience there. Had a bunch of amateur fights, though.
But that's kind of my point. Is like he's moved up in the pro ranks quickly,
Yeah,
despite not having that big of an amateur career. It almost leads me to be like, all right, is he truly gonna be ready when
yeah.
Terence Crawford fights him? And people from over there would be like, oh, but he sparred Dimitri Bivol and did this, that, and the third. And it's like, this is Terence Crawford. Like, this is the best welterweight we've seen since Floyd Mayweather. This is actually one of the best fighters of this generation. Like, I don't think
Right
Madrimov
now,
is
the
going to
best,
cause them a
one
lot
of
of
the best
problems.
fighters in the world. Yeah, I think Madrimov is a good fighter, and I'm not being disrespectful. I just
Same.
think once Terence Bud Crawford figures you out, it's a wrap. And we saw him do that with Spence. And Spence, if I know different weight classes, Madrimov, Spence, but Spence is a way better fighter than Madrimov. That's all I'm saying. Different weight classes. And
Yeah.
we know that Madrimov is a natural 154 pounder. However, Terence Bud Crawford, I think he can fight at this weight class. And he was saying in his last fight that it was actually hard for him to come down to 147. So, we're going to see him look even more powerful probably in this weight class. Bryan, let's get to some comments before we move on
we got
here.
some good ones.
Yeah, for sure. Let's give a shout out to our guy Jesus joining the show, and he already gave all of his predictions. I like Jesus. Crawford via unanimous decision. Tell us why you don't think he gets it done against Madrimov. I want to know that. Bakole round 10. Wow, that would be upset. Martin Bakole.
A lot of people think Bakole is going to win this fight.
The UK people are like, the UK people are going crazy for him right now. I'm telling you right now. Jose Valenzuela with the 10th round stoppage. You know what? That one's a firefight. Someone's getting knocked out.
Well,
But I just,
according to what Rolly Romero told us, like nobody, like he's like, remember he said, how can you miss Isaac Cruz's big ass head? So we'll see if Valenzuela is going to be able to get the stoppage. But I don't know. I do think if Valenzuela is going to win, it would be a knockout more than likely, but we'll see.
Yeah. Let's go over. Well, you know, we always got to give a shout out to IMPK13 who rocks with us every show, friend of the show.
Absolutely.
Good morning, guys. Thank you for rocking with us this morning, IMPK13. Tony Yayo, that you know, we usually see Tony Yayo sometimes late night, but early morning for Yayo this time. He says, I'm popping in for a random early morning show. Yeah, you definitely are. Let's go over to Casey. You guys call every line disrespectful. If you're not betting the underdog, can't really say it's disrespectful, can you? Sometimes I do. Like sometimes I'd be like, yo, this is disrespectful. Gotta give him credit.
Except
sometimes
this
the
one,
line is crazy. Yeah.
This one we didn't call disrespectful.
No,
we actually said this line is perfectly fine. The Terence Crawford. I actually think Terence Crawford could be
a bigger favorite.
Yeah. If Terence Crawford was minus 1,000, I'd be like, yeah, I see it.
I could see it. Yeah. So yeah, when we started the show, Casey, you're a little bit late because I was like, I'm not mad at the line. But I think sometimes we'll be like, the line is disrespectful, and then we don't take the underdog. So I get it. But we do always give the underdog like respect.
I actually don't think any of these lines in particular are that disrespectful. Maybe the Isaac Cruz one, which has me tempted to look at Jose Valenzuela and be like, hey, yo, like 310, you know, the knockout, even better odds. But I don't know if I can fully get there.
Yeah. So. I don't. Jesus really thinks you got all the stats, Bryan. What are the attendance and pay-per-view number buys to be?
Some things.
Yeah.
Honestly, what do we think this is gonna do? This is actually interesting. Like,
I think it'll be sold out in LA. 100%.
Sure.
It'll be sold out. Pay-per-view buys. I don't know.
300,000, 200,000,
which is solid.
Like that.
Which is solid in this day and age.
I think Terence Crawford could do a number. And this card is really good, but I mean, a lot of people have figured out ways to watch these things. So I'm not sure how many actual buys there are going to be. And I actually think in this era, 300,000 is considered pretty good.
Successful. That's a success.
So that's just a guess. That's just an educated guess.
Jesus, I like that Crawford touches you up with subtle punches, changes speed, sneaks power punches in between, and then later rounds turns it up. Yeah, once he figures you out, man, it's a wrap. And then it's just like, I feel like he sees red. And ever since he got to the welterweight division, that's kind of what it's been. Like he sees it, you know. Lobby CDQ, thank you for rocking with the show. You have Valenzuela and Cruz going the distance. You know what's crazy is I saw the odds on that and it was like plus 300 or something because I was thinking about it too. But here's the thing. It's just that we'll get into the fight after, but I'm just saying Valenzuela's chin is sus. That's the only thing where I'm like, one of these dudes is going to get knocked out because of their styles. That's all I think.
Me too. I agree with that. You know what? Now that you mentioned that, I don't know how I didn't think to look at this before, but because I've already done a couple previews of this for work or whatever the case may be. But what is the over under for this fight? Is what I want to see in terms of rounds. I know for Terence Crawford. I didn't even look at that. Yeah, I didn't even look at it. I know for Terence Crawford, it was. I was like, I know
it's going to be a knockout. Yeah. So if someone's going to get dropped, I'm betting a bunch of stuff on that.
I know for Terence Crawford, the over under is 10.5, which the under is actually minus 128. So if you do like the stoppage that we were talking about earlier, you probably like the under because you're like, all right, I could pass on 11 and 12 and collect minus 128 there at one book. At another, I think I saw it at minus 135. Yeah, the over-under for Isaac Cruz and Jose Valenzuela is, I just lost it, is, drum roll, it is, I don't know, because it's not even available at this
Yeah,
point.
you know what? That's why I didn't even look, because a lot of the odds and stuff aren't even out yet. I went to go look for
Fight to go to distance though is plus 150 at one book.
yeah.
Not plugging them though because they don't sponsor this program.
So this is something that we're going to get into the fight. So this is something that I was actually going to mention, Lobby CDQ. Isaac Cruz couldn't knock out Cabrera, and William Zepeda made it look absolutely easy. We're going to talk about if he's overrated or underrated. Let's get right into this, because this is going to be the co-main, and we got Isaac Cruz defending his title at 140 pounds, and straight up on the money line, he's a minus 430, and Jose Valenzuela is a plus 310. They love themselves some Pitbull Cruz on this line. I think Jose Valenzuela is a live dog because of the amount that Isaac Cruz gets hit and the way he fights. However, Bryan, how are you betting this fight, and who do you see winning?
I'm probably going to go with Isaac Cruz by knockout because of the chin concerns with Jose Valenzuela. We've seen him get knocked out silly before, early on in the fight too. I think this was Edwin De Los Santos who did it. And this was in round 3 of a very fun card in 2022 in September that Andy Ruiz was actually on, that we're going to talk about. As much as I think Isaac Cruz is beloved to a degree that, while I understand, I think is a little bit overstating how amazing he is, I don't think this is the fight that quote unquote exposes him. Some would say the Gio Cabrera fight already did that. I would say that this is a good matchup for him because Valenzuela is going to do what Isaac Cruz wants him to do: come forward, have a Mexican-style brawl, a fight in the pocket where Isaac Cruz can do what he does and bang you to the body and throw looping shots over the top and eventually get you. He could actually end this one early, potentially. Valenzuela is going to do the same thing. I just don't think he's as polished, so to speak, as Isaac Cruz. I think if Valenzuela comes out and is using lateral movement, boxing, using range, distance, and trying to fight in that way and sneak in some power shots every now and again and predominantly counter, like lure Isaac Cruz into counterpunching opportunities, I think that'll be an interesting strategy to use because he does have like the size to do it, to be successful at it. But, you know, that's something that requires a lot of patience against a guy who's going to be coming forward, and your instincts are to come forward as well. So to me, I think Isaac Cruz probably gets the stoppage. That's minus 150 at one book. But man, if Valenzuela comes out and is fighting smart and is trying to hit and not get hit, so to speak, I'd be tempted to live bet him because I think that's the strategy he would kind of need in order to win this fight.
I think he's a live dog in this fight. And I think that because of his power and the way Isaac Cruz fights, he fights a straight line, doesn't cut off the ring very well. And I know a lot of people love Pitbull Cruz, and they're probably going to kill me for saying that, but he doesn't, right? He's very one-dimensional. And I think I know he's gotten better from when he fought Tank. That's for sure. Pitbull Cruz has gotten better. However, the way that he fights, his style is beatable. But he's going to have the high work rate. He's going to come forward. So he's going to make it a fun fight. And he does have power. So Pitbull Cruz has all those attributes. It's just the fact that he can't cut off the ring, and he's going to come straight to a line. He's going to be right there for the jab. He's going to be right there. And Jose Valenzuela does have a decent jab, but I think sometimes before, back in the day, he used to have like that Edgar Berlanga swag where he was just trying to get the knockout right away, start off real quick and just try to get that knockout because he does have the power, but his chin is a little bit sus. So he is going to have to be careful, but I think this is going to be an all out banger. However, the one thing that Tank did really well against Isaac Cruz is he really used lateral movement against Isaac Cruz, and he used it really well. And he was able to touch him up. So Jose Valenzuela, if he can use his angles really well, not stay on that line of fire the whole entire time, land some big power punches, this can be a very interesting fight. But if he stays on that line and Pitbull Cruz gets him into the corner and maybe he's figured out how to cut off a ring, Jose Valenzuela is in trouble. I'm going to take Pitbull Cruz to win by knockout at minus 150. I think that's the bet to take. Is there a chance this goes to the distance? I mean, possibly, because Jose Valenzuela has gone better, but he would have to fight differently in this fight for that to happen. And I think Isaac Cruz, I think he's going to come in better than his last fight. And hopefully he does know how to cut off the ring in this one. He's defending his title. This is an absolutely big fight. It's in LA. There's going to be a ton of Pitbull Cruz fans. It's going to be absolute madness. And I don't see him losing. I don't see him losing on Saturday.
Yeah. Valenzuela will have to just fight a different fight. And this is very good matchmaking. Like, you take somebody who got the Chris Colbert knockout, got the vengeance against him after a lot of people, thought he was robbed the first time around. And then you're putting this in LA. Isaac Cruz is a fan favorite, not becoming one. He already is. He's becoming one of the more popular guys in the sport. Specifically on this side of the globe. I don't know about in Europe and other parts of the world, but specifically in like North America, he's absolutely like one of the guys now in terms of popularity. So putting him on the co-feature here is smart. You're putting him in the ring with another guy who wants to bang. Like, that's just smart matchmaking. And we'll see what happens after this. We'll see how he gets sort of booked from here. But yeah, I agree. Valenzuela will have to just come out with a different game plan in order to win this fight. You're muted. Got him.
It was bound to happen at some point. If Pitbull Cruz is going to fight the same way that he always fights, and Jose Valenzuela comes and uses angles against him, he'll be able to survive if he's not taking that much of a beating. But that work rate is what's going to be absolutely ridiculous for Isaac Cruz.
This fight provides good live betting opportunities. So just because we're saying Isaac Cruz should get the knockout doesn't mean that we won't be looking after round 2 and seeing like what else is out there. Like, for me, I think I can totally just flip if I see Valenzuela just using a different strategy after the first couple rounds, but we'll see.
Yeah. I think it's one of those things where we're definitely going to be intrigued by this fight, and also the way that Pitbull Cruz is going to have his performance. I want to see if he gets better. Let's move on to my favorite other fight on this card, Bryan. Andy Ruiz is going to be back in the ring. And I'm a little bit biased there, but straight up on the money line, he's a minus 370, and he's taken on Jarrell Miller, who is a plus 280. This is going to be a very good fight. It's been a minute since Andy Ruiz has been in the ring, so I wonder if there's going to be some rust there. But Jarrell Miller coming off a loss in a fight where I think a lot of people thought he was going to win. How do you see this one going? How are you betting it?
Yeah, I thought Jarrell Miller actually was going to give Daniel Dubois some problems than he did early on. My concern here is that while Andy Ruiz should be the favorite and it's just better all around, and there's a full circle moment here that I'm going to get to in a second. That's the most interesting piece of this fight for me. Andy Ruiz, we haven't seen him in 2 years. The last time we saw him, he got by Luis Ortiz. It wasn't a fight that, while unanimous decision, he didn't dominate that fight. Like, he scored the knockdowns, but Luis Ortiz was actually having a bunch of moments in that fight. Clearly won a bunch of the rounds. And, he's 43 years old. He got dropped multiple times. He was dropped before that, obviously, by Deontay Wilder multiple times. So, like, you kind of suspected the chin was weak and the age was a factor there. So, like, while it was a nice win, it wasn't a win that made me think, oh, Andy Ruiz is absolutely going to be a contender again and a fixture in the heavyweight division. And now 2 years later, he's returning to the ring against Jarrell Miller, who fought more recently, much more recently. And the full circle moment that I alluded to here, if people don't remember this is important. In 2019, Jarrell Miller was actually supposed to fight Anthony Joshua in June. And this is when he got popped for steroids, multiple steroids, like 3 failed tests or whatever it was. He gets suspended. In his place goes Andy Ruiz. And 6 weeks later, he knocks out Anthony Joshua in one of the funniest fights in boxing history, and also one of the biggest upsets in boxing history. Upset of the year for sure in 2019 at Madison Square Garden, Anthony Joshua's American debut. And it was kind of like, oh, here we go again with the British heavyweight, disappointing when the moment matters the most, and Andy Ruiz becomes unified heavyweight champion. And then he ballooned up and lost the belt immediately after, got outboxed by Anthony Joshua, who got his revenge in a fight that was less whelming, I guess, than the first one, to make up a word. But Now, full circle, we have Andy Ruiz versus Jarrell Miller. I think that's super interesting. I don't know what this does for the winner. I kind of think it depends on how it goes. I don't really have a bet that I absolutely love for this fight, but it's probably for me Jarrell Miller or nothing because I don't feel like I'm getting a lot of value on Andy Ruiz, whether points or by knockout. The worry about Jarrell Miller is the gas tank, but I'm putting him up against somebody who hasn't fought in 2 years. So I have reason to be concerned about both their gas tanks before looking at, hey, this is also in the heavyweight division. So I don't know what anybody's going to have left after like round 8 or 9. So I may not bet on this fight at all, but to me, this is probably Jarrell Miller or I just stay away from it.
Are you taking Jarrell Miller for this fight over Andy Ruiz?
I just said, like, I don't know if I'm going to bet on it at all.
No, I'm not even talking about a bet. I'm just saying who you're picking, like who you see winning on this fight.
Oh. Probably Andy Ruiz, but I'd rather bet on Jarrell Miller. I'm not sure how much sense that actually makes, but it's just like, all right.
No, that makes sense if there's value on Jarrell Miller, right?
That's what I'm saying. It's like the value bet is on Jarrell Miller here because Andy Ruiz hasn't fought in 2 years. Why am I betting him at minus 370 when he didn't even look that awesome in his last fight before that? So,
for me, I think Andy Ruiz has dropped so much weight. He's in incredible shape. He's been waiting for a fight, but that's the only thing. It's the layoff. But I think once Andy Ruiz gets into a rhythm, I think Jarrell Miller is going to have his success early on. And the last time that I saw Jarrell Miller, he looked terrible. And that's the only thing that I can go off of. He came in extremely overweight, and I did see a comment saying that Jarrell Miller looks to be in shape, but is he in better shape than Andy Ruiz? I don't think so.
He's a big baby shape. You know what I mean?
Yeah. He's looking swollen, big baby shape. But even then, I am looking at this fight and I'm thinking about conditioning. I'm thinking about how Daniel Dubois took care of Jarrell Miller in a fight where Jarrell Miller should have won that fight. I'm sorry. Like going into it, I did not take Daniel Dubois. Also, I think there's a lot riding on this fight because Andy Ruiz has been out of the ring for almost 2 years. I think it's legit like a year and like 11 months since we've seen Andy Ruiz, something like that. It's close to 2 years. And the fact that Jarrell Miller lost to Daniel Dubois and Daniel Dubois was able to get it done, Andy Ruiz has to have a good performance. Because if he doesn't, then we're questioning everything about Andy Ruiz. So a lot is riding for him on this fight because there was so much conversation about who Andy Ruiz was going to fight at one point. And no fights ended up happening for him. Remember, there were rumors like maybe Andy Ruiz should fight Usyk. Like, is this fight going to happen? We never saw any of this go down. So there's a lot riding on this fight for someone like Andy Ruiz. And I think he's going to have enough motivation to get it done against Jarrell Miller, who looked absolutely terrible against Daniel Dubois, came in overweight. His conditioning, he's not going to be able to handle Andy Ruiz's speed. Because that's the one thing Andy Ruiz
if he still has that. If he still has it.
Listen, the way that he's looking right now, Andy Ruiz, how he's looked the last 2 years, he seems like he's focused. Like we always go back to how he upset Anthony Joshua and then came back. You know, he got hood rich and he spent his money, gained a lot of weight and didn't take that fight seriously. But he kind of changed that around. And it's unfortunate we haven't seen him in the ring for 2 years, but this is his time to put on a good performance because he is getting older. Like I think Andy Ruiz is like sneakily like 30 something now.
He'll be 35.
Yeah, like this year. Like I remember when he was like way younger, and now I'm like, whoa. Andy Ruiz is getting old. So this is one of those fights where I think he has to have a good performance, and I'm just not betting on Jarrell Miller. Like he's for me, he's too much. I don't believe in Jarrell Miller at this point in his career, and it's hard to go against a guy like Andy Ruiz for me. So the odds actually, they're not all up for rounds. I see this one actually possibly going the distance.
Me too. In a nasty, ugly, fucking disgusting clinch fest.
Because I think Andy Ruiz will, he'll have the speed. He'll be able to land punches. But the fact that he wasn't able to get Luis Ortiz out the way, and we know how strong Luis Ortiz is, and then that 2-year layoff, and this is his first time back in like 2 years, I don't see him getting the knockout or the stoppage. I see it going the distance, but I do think Ruiz should try to get the knockout and stoppage. But if he's going to get it against someone, it'll probably be someone like Jarrell Miller, who looked terrible against Daniel Dubois. That's all I'm going to say. I'm off Jarrell Miller right now. That's all I'm saying.
I might not bet on this fight at all, to be honest. I don't even think this is an enjoyable fight to bet on. I think the next one is, which we're going to talk about in a second. But last note, Jarrell Miller has fought twice since Andy Ruiz last fought, and also fought the same summer that Andy Ruiz fought because he was on his comeback trail, so to speak. So he's been more active. But again, I don't think this is an enjoyable fight to bet on from like a
Who
you
cares
know
if he's been
our
active? He looks out of shape, and he doesn't even sit on his punches.
I don't know where I don't know where Andy Ruiz is at this point. So there's just too much unknown for me to be confident in that. Especially because Andy Ruiz, like, he hasn't fought since September 2022, and before that, he last fought in May 2021. That was the Chris Arreola fight, and I didn't think he looked amazing in that.
You put some respect on Chris Ariel's name, all right? That's a Cali guy. You put some respect on his name. That was a great fight.
He knocked down Andy Ruiz in that fight. Like, honestly, like
it's in heavyweight boxing, anything can happen. But if I'm just going by off what we saw in our last fights and what I've seen Andy Ruiz just off videos and how he's in shape and how he's focused, and I just look at the skill set, I'm rocking with Andy Ruiz in this fight. He's one of my favorite heavyweights.
We have a couple comments. And this is also in LA, so there's that in Andy Ruiz's favor. We have a couple comments. Let's get into them. We have on this fight, Jesus chiming in. Miller is mostly arm punches and uses his size, doesn't sit on punches or turn his punches. There's a question mark there that I don't think is supposed to be there. But yeah, I mean, he's going to be volume based in this fight. He's going to try to overwhelm Andy Ruiz with activity. We'll see how Andy Ruiz handles that. I don't think that Jarrell Miller is like some amazing heavyweight.
He's going to try to impose his will. That's what he has to do against Andy Ruiz. Yeah. Andy Ruiz is going to be too quick for him with the hands, though, and he's going to take a bunch of shots. That's how I see it going.
He was one of the guys that did a feature on early. This was way before the steroid thing. It was like 2017. This is actually where I met Chris Colbert and Bruce Carrington because they were training in the same gym in Brooklyn. But yeah, Jarrell Miller, like, he's never been a dude he doesn't have like amazing one punch power against these top notch dudes. It's just like kind of volume, and he's going to just lay on you and shit. You know what I mean? Like, it's not going to be a pretty watch. I actually like this comment from IMPK. Maybe easier to pick these fights after the weigh-ins. Yeah, although we wouldn't stream after the weigh-ins because, it won't live that long. So,
exactly.
You just gotta kind of get right into it.
You know what? Let's go over though to another fight that I think a lot of people will actually know. Ruiz beats Big Baby and fights Usyk. Remember, there was Ruiz and Wilder was a rumor for a little while. That fight never. So was happened.
Wilder and Jarrell Miller too. I wanted Ruiz and Wilder to happen. But Wilder now, I think hopefully he's done. Hopefully, yeah. I feel like someone's gonna lure him into a fight, which.
Hopefully it's Jake Paul. Hopefully it's Jake. That's a fight I'd be interested in.
Jake Paul might weigh more for that fight.
Yeah.
Than Deontay Wilder.
Let's get to Jared Anderson, Big Baby, who's going to be fighting on this card. Great card, by the way. Like, we could do all of these fights, to be honest with you, but we don't have enough time for that today. He's a -205, and Martin Bakole is a +166. A lot of people liking Martin Bakole in this one. Bryan, the UK loves him, and they think he's a live dog in this fight. How are you betting this one, and how do you see it going?
Jared Anderson was -190 yesterday. So this is I guess progress, if you want to call it that. Progress if you like the underdog here. Look, I've been just sort of reading, and I've seen like comments on posts about Jared Anderson from Top Rank, for example, a bunch of people who think Bakole is going to win. Bakole is this like boogeyman who's finally going to put Jared Anderson on his ass. And we've talked on this show about Jared Anderson. Like, yes, he's knocked out almost everyone he's ever fought. There have been a couple of underwhelming performances within the last couple of years, and he is somebody who clearly has flaws. I think we need to be careful about pushing him as the next great American heavyweight because while he's very exciting and all these different things and has like one punch knockout power,
Richard Torres is waiting back there, but yeah.
Like he's been tagged a bunch in some of these fights. Like, like there's been times where he pull backs a lot, like just sort of straight and just leaves himself vulnerable for these hooks from range, so to speak, or like straight right hands, especially from his opponents. Like, Bakole is seasoned. I think he's going to absolutely test Jared Anderson. I don't know if I'm like definitively he's absolutely going to upset Jared Anderson. Like I don't know if I'm all the way there yet, but to me, this is another one where I think the underdog has real value. Bakole's plus 166 to win by knockout or technical knockout is plus 220. And to me, this is a fight where while I think Jared Anderson is probably going to get the knockout because Bakole's actually been stopped before, and maybe this is a war where Jared Anderson's flaws get exposed even further, but he still knocks out the other guy. Like that could happen too. I don't think this is one that's going to go to the card, so I would look at the over under to see when it drops what that's going to be. But I this is a dangerous fight, and I'm partially surprised, and I'm sure there's financial reasons for this. I'm partially surprised that Top Rank is just allowing it. You know what I mean? Like, go ahead, fight on that card or whatever the case may be. But they also have a great relationship with the Saudis and what's going on over there. So
I think for Jared Big Baby Anderson, there's a lot riding on this fight because of everything that's going on for him outside of the ring. So for him, this is really important. And against Martin Bakole, a guy who, listen, he's tough. He's a tough fighter. I think the one time that he was knocked out, was that Chris Hunter? It might have been Chris Hunter, but then I take a look. You know what? Let me pull up his resume.
Michael Hunter.
Yeah, Michael Hunter.
You're confusing. You're confusing it. I know what Chris Hunter you're talking about.
Yeah. I'm gonna pull up his actual box rec here, but I take a look at the names and I'm like, who else has he fought? Like a really, really solid name. And
old Carlos Takam, but I get
very old. Like, he was past his prime at that point. And I'm like, I think for Jared Anderson, he's a switch hitter. He's young. He's got power. He does have flaws, but he's still really young. And I think that's the thing is like Jared Anderson is still getting better. I think this is a really good fight for him. I think if he gets it done against Bakole, we'll have to start putting a little bit more respect on his name because right now there's a lot of talk. Like people are like, Charles Martin should have beat Big Baby. He struggled against Charles Martin. Charles Martin is a sneaky vet though, and you can never count out a vet.
Former champion.
Jared Anderson was able to get it done. And plus, like Charles Martin's been in the ring with like Anthony Joshua. Like we can name the guys that Charles Martin's been in the ring with, right? He's got experience, man.
He wasn't in the ring very long with Anthony Joshua, to be fair, but he was in that ring at one point.
And that matters. I think resume always matters. Jesus says Bakole will stand his ground. Let's get this comment up here. Bakole will stand his ground like a huge mountain that will puzzle Jared. Possibly, but I think Jared will be able to get it done against Bakole, but I think Bakole will give him problems. I think this is a late round stoppage for Jared Big Baby Anderson because I think he's going to have to figure it out because Bakole is going to be a tough fight for him and it's not going to be an easy fight, but I think Jared Anderson gets it done. There were some odds that didn't come out yet for this one when it comes to alternate round betting, but I would take a look at that alternate round betting and probably bet on a late round stoppage, maybe between rounds 9 through 12 or something like that. But that's how I'll be betting that one, Bryan.
How do you feel about just the general hype for Jared Anderson right now? I kind of feel like some of it, like a touch of it has cooled off a little bit as we've seen in the last couple of years. I don't know if that's people being fickle or we're just seeing more holes that you could sort of poke in this game. But where do you feel like we are with that?
I think for me, I think the next great American heavyweight is Richard Torres. I'm sold on Richard Torres all the way through. And I think we're going to be talking about him and Top Rank is going to start to push him pretty soon as well. But I think for Jared Big Baby Anderson, I think there's a lot of talent there. And I think we see it. I think the Charles Martin fight made a lot of people question things about him. And then you take a look at the stuff that happens outside of the ring and you actually question how committed he is, how focused he is. And I think that's the issue. I think if he was more focused being this young and so talented, we would take him a little bit seriously. But because how he fought against Charles Martin and all this stuff going outside the ring, it's like, we know he's great, but we actually want to see him get some solid names on his resume. And I think Bakole's a good start. Like if he has a good fight against Bakole, we'll be talking about him more. And then it probably sets up like a bigger payday for him and a bigger fight.
Yeah, to me, I'd also for this fight, for both heavyweight fights, I do want to see the weigh-in before absolutely committing to something. I will commit to Terence Crawford by stoppage, and I will commit to Isaac Cruz by stoppage. Even though, again, a bunch of y'all are higher on Isaac Cruz than me, but I think this is a tailor-made fight for him. Like, I think he should get this done. If he doesn't get the knockout here, then I don't know.
Yo,
I don't know.
honestly, if Isaac Cruz gets the knockout against Jose Valenzuela, I think he might make me a fan. You know what I mean? Like he might make me a fan after that because right now I still have questions about him. I want to see him cut off the ring. I want to see him get better. I do like his fight style though. It's my favorite fight style. I just wish he had a little bit more head movement. Wish he did things a little bit more differently. Let's get to some comments before we mention the next two fights really quickly. David Morrell, Andy Cruz, two amazing Cubans who are going to be fighting. But let's get to some comments really quickly because people are hype on Bakole. Jared openly stated he doesn't have the passion for boxing in that segment with Roy Jones. Okay, so
I remember that, and I remember hearing that Strike First FC, and I remember being like, okay, like that can be so, but there's to your point, Chantel, there's just so much here that you kind of worry about, and then also the I want to retire and get out by the time I'm 27. Something he said before, which he's not that far from.
yeah.
We're talking about a couple years, so maybe he's just one of these dudes that just says shit. I don't know, but
Yeah, he does have star power written all over him though. Like if he
yeah,
was able to get it done, it would be massive.
yeah.
It would be absolutely massive. Let's go to Tony Yayo with a little bit of a funny one right here. Richard Torres looks like an extra in Boogie Nights movie. That's when he has the stash going, but the guy, the way he moves around the ring and his
Love him.
power, I like. And we've had him on the show. If you didn't go see that interview yet, go check it out. It's on our channel.
Yeah, we want to have him
He's a great
back.
interview.
My only
Definitely.
concern, with Richard Torres Jr. is well, two, the size, and in the amateurs, this dude wasn't an amateur, but he got knocked the fuck out by Jalalov when they were
Mhm.
amateurs at one point. I think it was in the World Championships. It definitely wasn't in the Olympics, although he lost in that one to Jalalov too. Jalalov is still like currently as we speak, he's competing for another gold medal.
Jalalov is good, yo. Like
Yeah,
he's one of my favorites. Like, and I need to see more.
I don't, but I don't like that. Like, I don't like pros fighting in the Olympics.
No,
I
yeah,
got it for 2021 in particular because like
COVID.
COVID, it got pushed back a year, and some guys like Keyshawn Davis and Troy Isley were like, "Oh, I'm not gonna just wait. Like, let me actually start my pro career, and then whatever." And they were like 2-0, 3-0, whatever. But I feel like if you're more than like 3-0, then come on, what are we doing? And this is a tangent, but like I'm forgetting her name, but somebody won against one of the Americans on the women's boxing team, Gonzalez, and she was like an IBF champion already. I'm like, what the fuck are you doing in the Olympics?
Yeah, it's supposed to be for amateur athletes,
Not
right?
anymore
That's
because
the
they
whole
allow
point.
pros to compete. But I've just
Well,
been
I
I've
mean,
been
you know what I'm
watching
trying to say.
I've been watching a lot of Olympic boxing, which actually has been very, very good. The judging, but the actual boxing has been very like if you just want to see 3 rounds of motherfuckers beating the shit out of each other, like that's what you're gonna get.
Olympic boxing has always been good in my opinion. But I mean, you do have the pros like in basketball and stuff like that. But for me, it's like,
It's not dangerous in basketball though. It's
yeah,
dangerous in boxing when you
that's
have
what I mean.
somebody
It should be
who's like
amateurs. It should be amateurs at that point.
yesterday, Juan Manuel Lopez's son, Juan Mita. I hate when this shit does that thumbs up thing. Juan Mita was fighting Hassan Boy, who's 31 years old, who's already a professional, who's like 6-0 with 5 knockouts, and Juan Mita's 18 years old. And I'm like, bro, if he gets knocked the fuck out here, like this is a dangerous thing. We shouldn't be pairing up. And there's dudes who stay in the amateurs forever. Like that's the thing. Like we've had examples of Cubans and guys from Europe and different parts of Asia just like never turning pro. Like that's a little bit different. But if you're somebody who's already had like a pro career that's gone on a couple years and you go back to compete against like 18, 19, and 20-year-olds for a gold medal, like what are we doing? In boxing in particular. In basketball, I kind of get it. And that's a little bit of a different thing. It's a lot of bit of a different thing because LeBron James and Shea Gilgeous-Alexander aren't fucking boxing each other. You know what I mean? Like that's different.
Yeah, so that's what I mean. Like, it's different when you're in amateur boxing. Like, the Olympics should be amateurs because it's a little bit different when it comes to boxing. Let's get to some more comments before we get to mention the other two fights that we haven't got to just yet. Let's go over to Tony Yayo, actually, who says Charles Martin should have beat Big Baby. Listen, there was a point where I was like, is this going to happen? Is he going to get upset? We already went to that Jesus one. Interesting one from IMPK13. Bakole suffered a shoulder injury in the 8th round of that Hunter fight. Okay, well, maybe that had a little bit to do with it for sure. I mean, if you hurt your shoulder, what are you to do, right? Anderson hype took a hit after the Martin fight. I definitely agree with you. I think that's what it was. It had to be the Charles Martin fight. Too many questions and then everything going outside the ring. But Bryan, there's a couple of guys that I feel like we don't really have too many questions on, but we want to see them fight better competition. And I feel like that's going to be happening on Saturday. David Morrell back in the ring. And this is going to be his first fight at 175.
Yes, he's going to be fighting for a light heavyweight championship because he's moving up.
Kalajic, who is a good fighter.
Vacant light heavyweight championship. He is. But I mean, David Morrell is like a minus $1 billion.
Yeah.
As is Andy Cruz. Like, these fights aren't interesting from a betting perspective. They are interesting from a stepping stone perspective because David Morrell is expected to win this, have a light heavyweight title. We've talked about him potentially being like, hey, is Canelo going to fight him? Well, if Canelo's not going to fight David Benavidez, he absolutely is not going to fight against David Morrell. I'm hoping that David Morrell and David Benavidez at some point fight each other. I know David Benavidez is setting himself up to be in line for the winner of Dmitry Bivol and Artur Beterbiev, which I'm totally fine with. Hoping that David Morrell can get in the mix because we've seen him overwhelm a bunch of guys, but he doesn't have the greatest pro resume yet. He looks fantastic. Like, I actually think he's probably the real deal, but we want to see him step up in competition. And then with Andy Cruz, he's fighting Antonio Moran, who we were talking about. He's been in the ring with a bunch of different guys who are high level, are contenders, have been champions. Jose Pedraza, Jermaine Ortiz, Arnold Barbosa, like legitimate dudes. I'm leaving one or two guys. Devin Haney. Devin Haney actually knocked him out, which, some people will be like, how you get knocked out by Devin Haney? I get it, but this is a big fight for Andy Cruz to be already taking this in his 4th fight, and it's for an international title in his division. So I don't know what meaning that has in 2024, but it's a step up. It's a regional title. And Andy Cruz is going to be one of these guys who's probably fighting for a world title by the time he's in like his 10th fight or sooner than that.
Yeah, and this is a tough fight. Kalajic actually lost to Beterbiev. He also lost to Marcus Brown in a split decision, but that was a robbery. I remember watching that fight, and that was a fight where I definitely believe that Marcus Brown did not win that fight. So he should really, essentially, in my opinion, only have one loss on his record, and that would be Artur Beterbiev, who's one of the best boxers in the world. I have him on my pound for pound list. So this is actually going to be a true test for a guy like David Morrell, and I think that's what we want to see. As for Andy Cruz, this is going to be a very, very good fight for Andy Cruz. I mean, when you think about the guys that Moran has been in the ring with. So Andy Cruz also getting a very tough test in a sense where we've kind of seen Andy Cruz do things a little bit differently in terms of getting better each time. And I think he's an absolute superstar. And it's crazy because, with Cuban fighters, he's already sneakily like 27 years old. They always start a little bit later. So I think this is a very, very true test for a guy like Andy Cruz. And let's see what he does if Devin Haney can get a knockout against him. I think Andy Cruz might be able to too, but it's going to be a little bit of a tougher fight. But those two fights I'm still keeping my eye on. Odds haven't officially come out all the way. The lines, when you take a look at betting, I think a lot of people are going to be taking David Morrell and a lot of people are going to be taking Andy Cruz, but you could also bet it on a parlay, which, maybe there's some value there if you do like a 6-fight parlay or something like that, right?
or if you wait for the methods of victory to drop, but I'm pretty sure it'll be heavily juiced for Morrell to win by knockout. Cruz, I'm not so sure. Cruz,
I could see him winning by unanimous decision.
You might be able to get some value on the decision, but I don't know where the lines are. Like, those are two fights I'm just not, from a better perspective, not interested. And the two heavyweight fights, I'm like, I don't really know what I'm gonna do yet.
But nonetheless, Bryan will have you covered on SummerSlam. And we will be rocking with you guys after the fight. So make sure to come and hang out with us. We will be taking your comments. We'll be going through all the fights. I'm not going to be doing anything on Saturday except for watching these fights. So I'm going to be ready on my couch scoring these fights because all the fights are really, really good. Let us know what fights you guys are looking forward to the most and how you're going to be betting them. Let's get to one more comment, Bryan, before we get up and out of here. Strike First FC. Morrell definitely looks the part. I think he's better off staying at 168. The IBF will be vacant soon. I don't see him fight for a real title at light heavyweight anytime soon. You know what's crazy is we just saw David Benavidez jump up as well, and you could tell there was a difference. Like, I don't feel like his power transcended. Very interested in seeing how David Morrell fights at 175. Very interested, because there was that difference. Like, you could tell that David Benavidez at that point was more natural at 168 than he was at 175. And I want to see what that looks like for David Morrell, because to me,
you mean like being a weight bully, as some people would say?
yeah, because he was a weight bully, but also it's like I just didn't see the power transcend in that fight. And that was the thing that kind of concerned me. But as for David Morrell, it's like we've been waiting for him to fight a guy that has, that's a signature name. Like, he needs a signature fight. But if he's able to get it done and he scores the knockout, I think he could be one of the best in this division. Like, I'm very high on David Morrell. And remember, there was also talk at one point that he was in the running to fight Canelo Alvarez. There was talk about that.
We'll talk about that. We should plug the live show, because we're planning another live show tomorrow. We're going to talk about Canelo Alvarez versus Edgar Berlanga, and whatever the hell is going down between Gervonta Davis and Shakur Stevenson. And
he's apparently fighting Zepeda now. We're getting into all of that tomorrow. It's going to be 11 a.m. Pacific time if you're on the West Coast, and 2 p.m. Eastern time if you are somewhere in New York, like Bryan. But thanks so much for rocking out with us this early in the morning. If you're on the West Coast, bright and early, we'll be back with some more live content. We got 2 live shows coming up, guys. So tomorrow, 11 a.m. on the West Coast, 2 p.m. on the East Coast. And then we're doing a post-fight show for all of these fights, the Bud Crawford, Madrimov card. We will be rocking with you guys. And thank you so much for hanging out with us this morning. Bryan, any final thoughts before we get up and out of here?
Yeah. Your girl, Tamara Tabalt's going to fight in about 12 minutes in the Olympics. So
that's why I'm trying to get up and out of here.
I'm trying to get up and out of here because Puerto Rico plays Serbia at 11:15 Eastern time. And oh boy, I'm very anxious. Tense.
One comment, I'm being extremely biased. Big Surge, I'm with you. Looking forward to see Mark Castro. I believe he fights tonight on the live trainings. He is he's like my 3 daughters, half Mexican and Salvadorian. I love Mark Castro.
Forgot about that.
I'm very excited to see him fight as well.
So much going on, Jesus.
Yeah, there's a bunch. But we hope you guys are enjoying the content. Leave the comments if you're watching this later. We'll be back with you tomorrow. And Bryan, I always let you get the final word, so I'll let you have it here.
I got nothing. We'll see y'all tomorrow.